Okay, welcome back everybody to Redemption Thursdays with Rabbi Pinchas Winston. I just wanted to point out to you that once again, that Rabbi Winston has written multiple books and on the topic of redemption, among many other things. His website is 36.org, as you can see under his name. A couple of my personal favorites are, I don't know if this comes out backwards or not, the Geula Barachamim seminar, which is amazing. It really prepares you for things. It says a seminar for learning how to mitigate the impact of anti-Semitism. Another one that, Rabbi, you're going to enjoy this one. It's really old. You might not be able to see it. Talking about the end of days with this kind of binder. You know, I've had this for so many years, but there are so many topics that gets people very encouraged to make Aliyah and understand the Kedusha of the Holy Land.
There's a hard copy version of that now.
Oh, yeah, I need that. I need to go through and pick out a whole lot of them that I'm missing, including your children's books. I don't have any children's books yet. I need to get some of those. Rabbi has children's books. And, of course, ETA, which is estimating the final time of arrival of Mashiach. And then just to ask anybody if you're interested in a different Geula project, there is a series of the Tehillim written by B'nai Korach that are supposed to bring the Geula, if you say them all together. I have a copy of this. My friend sponsored to print them up for me. And it says, Unleash the Geula with the astounding Teshuvah power of B'nai Korach. So if anybody wants this little booklet with all the Tehillim in it that you're supposed to say to help bring Mashiach, please contact me anywhere on the Facebook page or on the bringthemhome.org page or any of those, or you can write me privately if you know my details. All right, Rabbi, thank you for joining us tonight, and we'll see you later.
My latest child's book is Armageddon for 6-year-olds, but we'll talk about that one later on. Hashem. What I'm going to try to tonight, I actually have spoken about before in the past. It's just a very complicated topic, one of the most complicated topics there actually are. But just to start with an analogy, to put things in perspective, when I was much younger, I don't know if even yet bar mitzvah at the time, but I used to enjoy looking at the World Book Encyclopedia. I didn't do much reading as a kid growing up, but those I really enjoyed very much, especially the pictures. And one of the most fascinating pictures I remember looking at the entire time was the one of the human body that showed all the blood vessels and capillaries, the red things, and the blue things, and the heart, and the whole thing, and like that, or the digestive system, how that works, and I've watched documentaries that are much more sophisticated, and it's a phenomenally fascinating thing, because for the most part, when I eat, like anybody else, you put it in your mouth, and it's like basically like you throw it in and say, okay, body, take care of it. I've done my job. I found the food. I've eaten it. I've chewed the food. Now, it's going down my throat. It's no longer in my domain. It's not my body's responsibility to take care of it, whatever it is, whether it's a piece of chocolate cake, whether it's a steak, whether it's a vegetable, something healthy. And we're told all the time, certain foods you should eat, certain foods you shouldn't eat because they're not good for you. They're not good for your digestive system. It'll come back to you later on as you get older. Just because as a young person your body can handle most foods doesn't mean you weren't wearing it down, so that when you're older, 50s and 60s and onward, that you're not going to pay the price for it later on. But we don't know that. We don't see it. Just like smoking, for example. People smoke. They know it's not healthy for them, but they put it in their mouth and they smoke it. And sometimes people develop illnesses and then they realize the danger, but a lot of people don't, or it takes years before they actually do, or any activity. The body is a phenomenally fragile thing. One of the most brilliant lines I've ever heard was when someone's told me that someone went to a doctor, and if it's a true story or not, but it doesn't make a difference. And they asked the doctor why they weren't feeling well. And the doctor answered, unlike every other doctor I've ever been to, said, don't ask me why you're not feeling well. Ask me why you're not feeling worse, or why you're not feeling well much more often. Because there are billions of things going on in your body from a moment-to-moment basis that could easily go wrong. I mean, your skin alone is a phenomenal thing where it keeps in liquid, but it can also let liquid come out. Most things that have as many holes, as porous as our skin is, usually leaks all over the place, and there's nothing left inside anymore. And somehow the balance is maintained, and the body is an absolutely remarkable, phenomenal thing that evolution for sure never really could answer the questions about. But people do and think what they want to think, but we make a Baruch Asher Yatzar because, and we talk about the wonders that Hashem does each time that we have to take care of our personal needs. And it's just an absolutely remarkable system. And we know how fragile it is when it starts to break down, when we start to have problems, and then we start to realize, it's not as strong as we thought it was, and it's much more precarious. But in general, a person, it would be much easier to diet if you could put food in your mouth and you could actually watch it go in your mouth and what happens on a screen in the entire body, and see the digestive system, see how it's taxing the system, see how it affects the immune system, see how it doesn't break down properly like a vegetable might or something healthier, and that in fact the fats go and become sugars, or vice versa. Actually, for a book, I investigated the digestive system somewhat, and it absolutely remarkable. I mean, we just don't see it. It's all inside. It's all hidden away. So, unless you take the time to understand it, as health practitioners do, and people decide to watch what they're going to eat for the rest of their life, and understand how the system works, and they make diets. I once sat down with somebody who gave me a whole schmooze about how he doesn't eat past 5:30 at nighttime because the body works like this and he eats like that. And then half an hour later, it was very, very, very specific approach to life based upon understanding how the system works. I didn't buy into it necessarily, but maybe I should have. Yeah, but we don't see, and because we don't see, so it doesn't affect it. Global warming, if in fact global warming is a reality, I lost track of the score at this point in time. But the same thing with the environment. People drive their cars every single day, putting emissions into the air and polluting water. And I mean, one of the things that absolutely astounds me is garbage. I mean, every day, or at least twice a week, the garbage trucks come and they pick up all this garbage, tons of it, week after week, year after month after month, year after year, for hundreds of years already, and it doesn't disappear so quickly. And if we were sending that in rocket ships into outer space, then okay, it's a big vast universe out there, and you can just send it in the rocket and keep going for a long, long distance. We never know about it the rest of our lives. But it's on Earth somewhere, So once I saw a big, huge mound of dirt where there actually was a dumping site that they built a hill out of it, and it takes a long time for things to disappear. But we don't think about that because the guy comes, picks up the garbage, takes it away. I don't even know where he goes. I mean, I think I actually do. I once saw in Geula Shalayma someplace where they're dumping it, but for the most part, we don't see that. It is so we just keep making more garbage. We don't think about it, right? And the same thing is true in every aspect of life. I mean, the average kid probably thinks that there's no such thing as farmers anymore because cornflakes grows in the shelves of your local store, like every other products. He doesn't see the delivery truck show up in the morning, drop it off. He just comes in the store in the morning with his mother, whatever, sees the bread there, right? Where's the bakery? It's like they don't see all the process, the cutting down of the planting of the wheat, the winnowing, and the whole thing, and we're constantly blind to the reality of the world around us, which for the most part may not make a difference. For a lot of people, it just doesn't make a difference. Their life is not going to be changed dramatically because of what they know or don't know about how blood flows through their body. Unless, of course, when you get older, then it becomes more of an issue. Especially when we're young, because everything seems to work relatively well. Baruch Hashem, and the body is strong. But as you get older, you start to realize that it's not so simple, and you might even take more time. I mean, I've looked up online so many medical issues, not because I'm going to make a decision about my health, but necessarily what I see online, but just understand what's going on, what might be the cause of this that I'm feeling or going through. And it's just absolutely amazing how much information is available, and how instructive it is, and how much you can better understand the world in general. And like I said, a lot of it might not make a difference. Some people have digestive systems that work until the age of 95, and they have few problems. Other people, it starts to bother them already in their 40s, if not younger, and they have to be aware of certain things. It's different from person to person, but one thing that is consistent is that everybody is here to fulfill a specific purpose and to be the very best person that they can be, You can't be the best somebody else. That's not relevant to you. You can only be the best you can be. But what does it even mean? How do I know I've been doing that? Yeah, my Rosh Hashiva, Rav Noach Weinberg, we used to constantly drill into us. You can be great. You can be great. You can be great. You can be great. All the time. We'd have meetings with him. He'd push us and he'd say, "You can be great." And it kind of like drilled into our mind that before him, I never considered the possibility. It never wasn't even relevant. Why is it so important even? But with him, he was trying to bring out our potential. He was trying to help us to actualize more of who we were, so we can make a bigger difference to the future of the Jewish people and to ourselves, and ultimately to earn more reward in the world to come. Because for the most part, people are underachievers. They really are. They're just coping from day to day to day, and they think that's enough. If at the end of the day, no one complains about what they've done and how much they've accomplished, it's a successful day, as long as they're happy with what they could accomplish. But what's going to happen if they find out later on that there was so much more to accomplish? That you could have, achieved so much more, and you were expected to achieve so much more, and the ability to figure out how to do that was also available, and you chose not to pay attention to it. So how are you going to feel then? Whatever. As long as I'm happy right now. That's not true. That's not true. The Mesillas Yesharim, the Ramchal, he writes and says that a person will say that now because that's what they're feeling right now. But later on, we all know what happens later on, years later, and you look back on your life and the things that you thought were worth sacrificing for things that were important at the time become just the opposite. They become the things you wish you didn't sacrifice, and you had them today because those things that you enjoyed, they were part of who you were and developing you, but you probably could have done without them. But this could have really helped you a lot for the rest of your life. And it all comes down to what you know and what you understand and how how deeply you understand the system. So over the last couple of years, I've seen various different forms and works and books, and they described a system that, quite frankly, most people in the world have no idea about, and even those who do understand the system might not exactly understand how to implement it and how to use it to their advantage. And I'm not saying that I do, and I'm saying that I can help you to find that out, but it's certainly worth knowing what's really going on, because on one hand, there's history that you're watching it like a movie. It's like a television show. You're just taking place in front of your face. The headlines, the news. It's like, and the person next door, and your spouse, and your child, your parents, or whatever. It's all happening, and it's like a script, just being acted out. And you read about it just like you read a novel, right? And so did the following thing, and he went down the corner, and and it's just like scripted out, and there's nothing more going on than what's in the story itself. Sometimes the story is a little trickier, like one of these conspiracy stories. So then you find out that there's a backstory, a sub story, and things happening behind the scenes, and you need to know these things to put the story together, understand it, and it all comes together at the end. But for the most part, we cope. We just watch what's going on. We follow the stories as much as possible and try to make as much sense of them as possible, but not really knowing what's actually happening behind the scenes. What's really the main theme of history. And you start to get wind of this because basically people in general, like you ask somebody who's secular, and even not, somewhat religious, you ask them, what about the Bible? What about the Torah? Right? What about the books of the prophets and things like that? They'll say, listen, maybe once upon a time those were important to people, if they were at all. They're probably written by man, and that's over. We moved on. There was an article in 1992 in Time magazine called "What Does Science Teach Us About God?" A very fascinating article, and in the article, basically, they interviewed different scientists to try to get their take on religion and science, and whether it comes together. The scientists that believe, the scientists that don't believe. And in this article, basically, there were two paragraphs for me personally that really summed up the entire article, but not just the entire article, but all of life, and really deeply the tree of knowledge of good and evil versus the tree of life itself. And the author didn't intend that. I mean, I was just divine providence. I just happened to get that magazine, happened to read the article. And these paragraphs were so profound for me that they actually inspired me to write a whole book based upon them, these 2 paragraphs themselves. And just paraphrasing the 2 paragraphs, one the first paragraph said, I don't think they were side by side, but they came one after the other. And the first paragraph said, if religion's stock and trade is the inexplicable, the mysterious, then the future does not bode well for religion, because science, of course, is demystifying life every day, all the time. Weather, the body, things that were once mysteries to us, we couldn't explain except by assuming that there were gods up there controlling the entire thing. So you brought sacrifice and things like that to try to buy them off, right? As a way to explain it. And that was the scientific approach back in the time of the Greeks and before that. Zeus and all these other, the pantheon, to try to explain the weather and relationships and fate and things like that. But we don't need that anymore, because science has, lifted the veil and shown us what's going on b'derech teva, naturally speaking. So religion, if it's in fact based upon the mysterious, is going to become more mysterious as the world becomes less mysterious. But the second paragraph was stunning. It said the following thing. It said, however, if a person steps back and looks at the universe as a whole, then this overarching pattern begins to emerge that suggests a designer. I mean, that was a very bold statement to make. It sounds like a contradiction, because on one hand, we're saying that there's no God is not necessary. And this is what Professor Stephen Hawking basically claimed to be his greatest contribution to science. He showed the world that you don't need God for Bereshis, for creation. And that's the first paragraph. But the second paragraph says that even he himself in his book, A Brief History of Time, explained that there are things in the universe that are so rare and yet so essential to life that they seem deliberate, that something made it happen that way, that if you wanted to say there was a God, this would be one of them, like a certain Korban atom that only existed once at the time of the Big Bang. Without that, nothing else can happen, etc., etc. Even he writes on his book itself. So it's like you've got these 2 ideas, and you have to break through to find out how it both works. But that's exactly what the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra versus the Eitz Chaim is all about. The Eitz Hadas Tov Ra was the how of creation, the how it all works. The everyday running of life, the demystified aspect of life. That's what Adam wanted to find out, and that's what he went after. That's why he learned about good and evil, because he learned how the world could be used for good or for evil. And that's just a technical reality. And it's amazing. The truth is, everything today, Kabbalistically, the definition of an Eitz Hadas Tov Ra today is anything that is a combination of good and evil has the status of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, including us, because we have good and evil too. We have Yetzer Hara inside of us, and we also do good, Yetzer Tov. So we're also on the level of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Food is also, even the Gemara, even the Talmud, because it deals with good and evil, pure and impure, right and wrong. It's got both aspects to it. That's the tree of knowledge, good and Eitz Hadas Tov Ra. The Eitz Chaim is a much higher level. It's much purer. It doesn't have the evil aspect. It may talk about it, but it's not really dealing with that. Pure Kabbalah, pure applied Kabbalah, just like pure applied physics. You look at like quantum mechanics and the theoretical stuff. You can't even see how it produces the technology that comes from it. Those other people, technocrats, do things like that. But the actual just the equations that describe the forces of creation and how things interact with one another and the rules and the theories and all that, right? So you've got also the same thing is true when it comes to pure Kabbalah, Idra Rabbi, Idra Zuta. These are 2 main works in the Zohar. And Sifrit Nusa is a third one. And you have Midrash Nedla, but these are more technical realities that just describe that the completely mechanical aspects of the spheres and creation. And that knowledge, interesting enough, is the knowledge that allows a person to take a look inside the watch. You look at a watch. I mean, today we have these electronic watches; they're more sophisticated. But even in the old days, with a wind-up watch, a simple wind-up watch, where classic watch, turn the thing and keeps time. I mean, I'm still astounded how you can just turn this little dial and it can keep time for like almost at least 12 hours accurately. I mean, to figure out all the gears and the tension, it's like, and you open the watch. And all these gears working in synchrony and making things happen and keeping track of the time. I mean, genius, absolute genius, how we came across things like that. And I watched a documentary on how they developed specific bombs to blow up dams during World War II as part of the war against the Germans, the Nazis, and the testing and the technology and the thinking and the advanced thinking to come up with a specific bomb that could be dropped at a certain height and bounce off the water to hit the dam, because there's all kinds of problems of blowing up dams. Not a very simple. You think it sounds like a simple thing to do? Just drop a bomb. That's it. That's not true. And genius, absolute genius. But until you open it up, I mean, you hear about these things and you read about these things, but until you open it up and look inside and see how it works, you don't understand. You don't know, and that lack of knowledge, in some respects, doesn't make a difference. The average person just needs to know how the computer works. They're not going to fix it if it breaks down. They'll go to a computer shop. They'll try to invest in one that won't break, but if it does, they'll take it to a technician. Most people, they won't work it out for themselves. So therefore, they just need to know how to get the most out of it. But when it comes to your own personal life and going to the world to come and maximizing your potential and being the highest level of human being you can possibly be, which means being a partner with God in the rectification of creation, because that's the starting point. The starting point is that whatever man thinks of the world, whatever he's done with it, whatever how he views it, is secondary to what it actually is. It was made by God at the beginning in an imperfect state for man to participate in its rectification. It was supposed to be a simple thing. Well, look, simple enough, but not simple, obviously, because if it was so simple, then it would have been successful. But it wasn't. It was a failure. But it wasn't a failure because that's all history. Adam was supposed to not choose, or sorry, not eat. He's supposed to choose not to eat from the Eitz Hadas Tov V'Ra until Shabbos, the first Shabbos. And then at that point in time, the tree of knowledge of good and evil would have been transformed into the tree of life. And not only would it be allowed to eat now from the new revised tree of knowledge of good and evil, but it would have been a mitzvah to eat. But because at that time, Shabbos would have finished, the fact that he chose not to eat and waited until Shabbos, plus the Kedusha, the holiness of Shabbos, that would have rectified creation completely. And we wouldn't be having this shiur like this right now. We'd all be sitting in the Garden of Eden, enjoying paradise for the last couple of thousands of years, and none of that would make a difference because time would be an issue for us. We wouldn't probably die anymore, and really the world to come. That was what's supposed to happen. Instead, he ate. He made the decision, the faithful decision, to eat. And as Kabbalah explains, not only did he not finish off what God had started and mostly completed, we just had a little bit left to do. Right, he's like a son, who the father says, you can hammer in the last few nails. That's all. He's put all the nails in this all together, and the son, is not quite the expert. He says, you can hammer in these two nails I left. They're halfway in already, right? Hammer. The son winds up, to hit that nail, right, and he misses. And instead, he goes right through the wood and breaks it, and it causes all kinds of other nails to get loosened and all that. The father's like, what have you done? How could you do such a thing with one fell swoop? You not only did you not finish off what I started, you undid so much of what I did already. That's what Adam did. He reversed a lot of what God did to rectify creation. And the rest of history has been about fixing all of it up, all of it. And one way or another, creation has to get to the point by Yemos HaMashiach. It's been going on for thousands of years. Right, and it's through our choices and through the suffering we undergo, and through the Torah that we learn, the mitzvahs we complete, and with the proper intention, and the kindnesses that we do, everything, the things that we know we're doing, and the things that happen, to us, Tikkun either happens because of us or through us, but either way it's going to happen. There's no holding it off. Even our worst decisions, even our most destructive tendencies cannot stop creation from getting to its point of completion by a certain time in history according to the divine master plan. As hard as we try. And if we do, seem to interfere with the process, it only comes back against us in the end. Even a sin, for example, Kabbalah explains that when a person does a sin, right, the entire duration of the sin, the energy is used for the sin itself. The person is using those sparks and that energy in creation to do the sin. But the moment the sin is over, the energy transforms itself from the sin into a punishment. The person's own sin morphs into the punishment if the person does tshuva in time, because it's a little bit of a delay to allow it to happen. If a person does tshuva, so they can mitigate it, the tshuva itself fixes up the sin. Plus the kapar, right? But if they don't they don't do tshuva, so then they will have to suffer the consequences, which is exactly what it is. It's a consequence, not so much a punishment as it is a consequence. It's the result of what they themselves have created. God, technically speaking, doesn't even have to get involved. He's already set it in motion at the beginning of Ma'aseh Bereshis. He's still involved. He still organizes and runs everything all the time. But it's such an automatic reality that we can, in a sense, we control our punishment based upon how much of the sin that we actually do. So one way or another is going to happen. You see a Holocaust, right? And you see pogroms, and you see crusades, and we don't even know what's coming up next. There's the talk of the third world of Gog, the third war of Gog and Magog, which we don't know what it will look like yet. And if we're sitting here today, well, it doesn't look like it's going to be so bad. But today, we don't know how things are evolving. It also looked like Chamberlain came back in 1938 with a paper in his hand, saying peace in our time, because that's what it looked like to him at that time. And then it became the worst war ever in the history of mankind to date. And mostly because of Hashgacha Pratis, but even without it, just naturally speaking, that's the way things evolve. That's how they start to become what they become. And it's like if you open it up and you look behind it, you can see why there's a World War II. You can see why there's a Holocaust. Not necessarily that you could stop it from happening, because as we spoke about before in the past, all of history, according to the Medrash, according to the Sforim, according to the deep understanding, it's all been written going back to pre-Ma'aseh Bereshis. If you will, the discussion unto itself, right? But the actual book, the screenplay has been composed, has been written already, and we're just basically filling the roles of whatever has to be done. But if you understand it, then at the very least, it's energizing, it's inspiring. And even whether you merit to learn this and understand it or you don't, there's also a function of divine providence. But if you find yourself being somebody who either is learning it and understanding it, and therefore you can implement a certain lifestyle based upon it, or teaching to others, that's all part of God's master plan. And you have to take advantage of it, to turn your back on it because you're lazy, because you're tired, because you don't want to know. That's something that we're responsible for. So that's all by way of introduction. If it doesn't get done in one session, we got others to complete it. And the truth is, it really should take a few because it is such a complicated process. But the real reality, right, that's described in the Bible, the Torah, even though today the world seems so modern and so advanced, and mankind seems so smart, although that's fading with every passing generation, that it seems that we're becoming less wise, we're technically smart, but life smart, that's waning. I mean, those days seem to be passing. And as Gemara says, right before Mashiach comes, wisdom is despised. The wise people are despised. The people don't want to know the truth anymore. These are all signs of Mashiach's arrival being imminent. So that is how it tells you, based upon that the world is not the way it's supposed to be. But one day, imagine, right? One day, God is going to show up, and it's so hard to understand this. It's like someone asked the question recently. how does it work? I mean, like, how do you get the words of Zechariah to come true? On that day, God will be king over the entire world, and on that day, God will be one, and his name will be one. How do you get the whole world to believe in God? I mean, it's such a massive task. Not for God, because if God wants to, he can just wipe the slate clean and just put it into people's heads and make them think like that. He can make everybody religious on the spot just like that if he wants to. That's not the way he works normally, but he could. So for him, it's not hard. But how do we do it? How are we supposed to bring it about if we're supposed to, in fact, bring it about? And the reason we ask this question is because we're working with a certain set of parameters that we ourselves created for the most part, and they're limiting us. The same way, for example, I can't fly. I wish I could fly, but I can't fly. Not without a plane, not without some device to make me fly. Why not? Because the laws of physics say I can't fly. A bird can fly, which is amazing. He can fly, not a problem. It's a very simple thing for a bird to fly. He's got the wings, curvature. So we mimicked it, made airplanes out of it, which is also remarkable too. But it's just laws of physics. The table's a table. But that's all because that's what you're used to. That's what we've grown up with. That's the way we've been trained to think the entire time, because that's what we found. Just like even Western society, if you ask the average person, how did Western society decide to become what it was, what it is, and go this path? And the answer is no one really knows. It's just trial and error, and based upon path of least resistance and all these factors that came into play. This works, this doesn't work, but no real set philosophy, except maybe once upon a time all men are created free, and therefore they should be able to be happy and things like that. But that's also based upon the Bible too, to a large degree. But we take one thing. All would have to happen was God comes down and say, "Okay, it's over. I gave you like 5,000 years and change to work it out, and you didn't. And some did, some didn't, and some accomplished, and some didn't. And, but now it's over. The director comes on stage and says, "Cut," and he reveals himself just like that. What does it mean for God to reveal himself? How does that work? It's just an awareness. Everyone gets to hear him talk like at Mount Sinai. Like, what does that actually mean? So you just have to realize to begin with that in order to be, that we talk about thinking outside the box, this is really having to think outside the box. Because we have people in history, for example, like the Arizal, who could do miracles. The Gemara is filled with stories of Rabbanim, Tanaim, who could do miracles. The Leshem explains that because of the destruction of the Second Temple, God gave the keys to miracles over to the rabbis of that generation. And the stories are unbelievable. They're doing miracles. Like we go to the Makol to buy food, they just do miracles. I mean, I can recount several right now on the spot. One of the Meir Balaness. You may have heard of him before. There are foundations in Tzedakah set up in his name. Why is he called Balaness? Because he was a master of miracles. He could do miracles at will, and he did them. And they didn't, do them wholesale. It had to be necessary. It had to be what they thought was the right thing to do. Because when you do a miracle, you change history. And who says that every change of history is a positive thing? The Rizal himself said that he could use names of God to change history, but he wasn't sure of the overall impact, and therefore he was afraid to do it. Moshe Rabbeinu used the name to kill an Egyptian. This runs through the whole, So, are these legends? Are these fables? Are these, just imaginary things, or are they the real reality? That's really the question that we're really asking over here. What is the real reality? What is the fabric of reality? How does this really work in the end? What's really going on? Just like, for example, and as a Chafetz Chaim pointed out, that everything in the physical world is the way it is to teach us about the spiritual world. Because we can't see or taste or smell the spiritual world. We can see and taste the physical world, but the physical world is the way it is because the spiritual world is the way it is. Like, it's just like a child is like his parents or her parents. Likewise, the physical world is like the spiritual world from which it comes, originates from. Remember, something from nothing, the physical from the spiritual. So the physical world, right, is the result of what's going on in the spiritual world. And therefore, if you look at the physical world, you can learn Musar, you can learn ideas, you can that you can apply to the spiritual world as well. So, a computer screen is a remarkable thing. I mean, you press it on a keyboard. In the old days, when my first book, I actually wrote it on a typewriter. So you pressed the key and you saw the metal arm go boop onto the page. And on the other side of that metal arm was a K. There was a K or a J, whatever letter you pressed. So it was quite obvious that this thing caused that to move, and you pressed the J, so you got a J and a K or whatever you're trying to spell. All the letters were there, but not anymore. Now you think you're doing that. Your brain is like being fooled, but you're pressing a K, and that's sending electric impulses, and now it's even wireless, which is even more amazing, right, to the computer, and the computer is saying, when you get that like that, that means the letter K. And when you get that letter K, put that on the screen and put it right here on the page. But it's just electricity, and it's just ones and zeros, and and pixels and all these different things. And yet here you have a picture that looks quite like the thing that real life. Absolutely remarkable how we can do. I mean, the technology to come up with all of this that once upon a time was just science fiction, and now you can do Skype and Zoom, and it was like absolutely remarkable. But it tells you that the same thing is true in the spiritual world, that really the physical world, I wouldn't say is an illusion. That's a little bit too complicated, too complex at the time being. That it is a projection. Just like, for example, that if you watch a movie, again, today I don't know the technology in movie theaters, but in the old days, there was a camera that sat in a booth, so you couldn't hear the noise going around the entire time, projected a picture onto a screen, a big screen, and you watch the screen as if three-dimensional people were actually acting out a play. It wasn't true, but that's the way your brain gets fooled into it. You watch it, and it's entertaining. It's not. Try watching the real old black and white movies going back to the 1920s, which at that time were entertaining because they were new and novel. But today it's like you can barely last 60 seconds with these things because it's like so boring in a sense, compared to what we have today with all the special effects. But it's a projection. The real image is on that piece of film, and the light comes through, and it's magnified through a lens, and somehow over space and time is still quite accurate onto the screen to fool your brain. And that's exactly how reality works too, is that everything we see and everything we experience, as physical and as real as it is to us, is really what the brain is interpreting. And what's really going on is a spiritual world. Now, they've made movies about things like this, where the people in the movie, they think that they're real, but really, it's a computer simulation. There's books where the main character of the book is talking to the author, or the author is talking back to the character. They're having a dialogue, even though it's really the same person. But they actually get fooled into believing that the character in the book itself is real enough to talk to the author and tell what to say next. Very clever. But all of these things teach us about life, what's really going on. And what's going to happen is on the day that God comes out and says, "Hi guys," like in last week's Parsha, Ani Yosef. What does Ani Yosef mean? I mean, it's a perfect example of this idea. I mean, this is really what this idea is all about. Ani Yosef, the brothers are stunned. Why are the brothers stunned? Well, for a couple of reasons. But the biggest reason of all was because it's very hard to readjust on a dime when you think reality is this, and it turns out to be that. Just imagine all the people who've been walking around saying, religion is a waste of time. God doesn't exist. No Torah was given at Mount Sinai. The prophets were a bunch of, charlatans who, they wrote down things that didn't make sense, and people believe, passed it on, and their whole life is built upon this, and they're wasting their time. They don't think they're wasting their time. They're investing their life into things that don't really make a difference spiritually, but physically they're a lot of fun, and they're gambling. They're taking a risk. They're betting the religion that God is not true. So they're making a whole life. But all of a sudden God comes in and says, yeah, it is true. Hi, the Torah is alive and well, even in this century, this time, and the entire history since it was the close of the Torah, it's just basically been people running around the room looking for meaning in life, not realizing that there was a bigger room outside the one that they're living in right now. What's going to happen to a person who all of a sudden wakes up and realizes that all those years of life and time, of talking against God and literally going to war against him, and living a life that does not fit at all into what God prescribed for mankind, what are you going to say? What can you say? But what will you be able to say? Mostly it'll just be shock, complete shock, because two realities clashing like that, to find out that the one you were living was actually the dream, not the real one. And the one you thought was the dream was actually the real one. It's a mind bender. Really is very, very hard. So you have to like go beyond that. You have to realize that the real reality is not the one we're living right now. I mean, listen, I'm trying to play games over here. Yes, to go to work in the morning, to get up, you have to deal with it like the real reality, but you have to at least understand. Redemption, for example, is already here. Like, we live our lives like redemption is a thing in the future, that it's something out there. It hasn't yet happened yet. It will happen when it happens, when God says yes, he allows it, and then it's all going to unfold, and we're going to see it, and then we'll realize that's redemption. Until that time, it's just exile, and exile because there's no redemption. And then we're going to find out that redemption was always here. Just like the Garden of Eden. Where'd it go to? So there are midrashim said that God took it back to Shemayim, went up, but really it's just 11 the spheres. Everything is just 11 the spheres, and they don't go anywhere. They're exactly where they are. If anything changed at all, it wasn't, it was the world, because man changed. It all begins with man. A person, even just a Baal Tshuva, a great example. Somebody at one point in time in life that religion's not for me, it's not true, it's not important, it's antiquated, it's a waste of time. That was their perception, and that's the way they looked at it. Whatever they saw religious Jews doing things, it was meaningless. They could not see it in a meaningful way. Even though they might do bris milah, but it's more of a tradition, that was a whole perspective. And then one day, for whatever reason, they read something, they go to a class, they experience something, and all of a sudden their eyes are opened. Their eyes are opened, and all of a sudden it looks different. And the more they look, the more different it looks. And then their whole perspective changes, and of course, their outlook on life changes. And when their outlook on life changes, so does their lifestyle change as a result. And then, of course, the people who leave behind think you're in a cult, or think that you lost your mind, and they look so backwards and so out of touch because you realize the truth. They don't anymore. This is what it's all in the mind, the back of the brain. You're interpreting, no windows. It's all back there. So, what is the system? What's really going on? If we could really see the world with the proper spiritual eyes, what would we see? How would it look in the end? So, to start off with, because it's already late and the introduction was important, but to start off, trying to imagine life just in a general level, we'll go into more detail as we go on, and to see how redemption is in fact already here, and the only reason why we're not experiencing it because we don't know how to look at it, we don't know how to see it. The whole thing in Mitzrayim, the whole thing in Egypt, the whole thing in Babylonia with Mordechai and Esther. How do we look at the story? Well, it was exile, it was bad, and then we began to, get freed. Hashem did miracles, sent Moshe Rabbeinu, sent Mordechai, did his thing, and later on the Hashmonai did their thing, and they fought back physically against the Greeks and all that. There's this miracle element always in these stories, and that's a very important part of the picture. But the way we look at the miracle is like God gave us a gift, because he can do whatever he wants. So God, a little light comes down, miracle, just like that. That's not what's going on. The miracle, believe it or not, and here's a story that sums it up. Famous story, right? Rabbi Yochanan ben Dosa, one of the miracle workers of the Second Temple period of time, his daughter comes to him and says, Abba, I lit Shabbos candles using vinegar and it's burning. I'm in trouble, right? The rest of them go, whoa, amazing, what a miracle. Look at this. Hey, come take a look. This is that's what we're all going to do, right? But she's worried. Why? Because a miracle that she doesn't deserve will come off her reward that will to come. So she comes to her father and says, what do I do? I can't put him up against Shabbos already. Is there a problem? And he comes back with a fantastic answer. He says, The God who says that Shem and Zayas should burn, that oil should burn, well, oil burns is combustible. But who says combustible things should burn? Well, that's what we found. That's where the world is. Combustible things burn. So we say combustible things burn. But that's a miracle too. But the same God who said the Shem and Zayas should burn consistently is also making the vinegar burn too. So if you understand that there's no such thing as nature, it's all miracle anyhow, then this is nature. Then you've done things wrong. But if you believe this is a miracle, you believe this is malam neteva, above nature, then this is a miracle, and it might be a problem for you. So it's your choice. How are you going to look at this reality? Your perspective, your mindset, right? How can you see into what's happening over here? Do you understand the real dynamics of history? So one of the best analogies I have that I use for myself is an hourglass, except an upside down one. Now, normally an hourglass, you have an upper chamber and you have a lower chamber, and all the sand is in the upper chamber, or whatever it is, salt, whatever they're using, right? And it's calibrated to fall at a certain speed, or it's been timed, based upon gravity. And if you want to know when 2 minutes are up to take your egg off the fire, or you want to know when an hour is up, so they put enough, whatever it is, sand into the glass, and it falls through. And when the last grains of sand have fallen through, the hour's over. Or the 2 minutes are up, take the eggs off. They're soft boiled, right? But instead, it's the opposite. Here it's the other way around. All the elements are in the lower chamber, and they have to go up. You'll say, but that's against gravity. We're not talking about physical elements. We're talking about what we call the tzotzi kedusha, holy sparks. So for today, right? Well, today's thought lesson to end off with is that life basically is about moving all of those sparks from the lower chamber to the upper chamber. They have to all go to the upper chamber. When the last spark has left the lower chamber, which is our world in which we live and function, and it gets to the upper chamber, which is where they're supposed to end up, by Mashiach, the bells will go off, and Mashiach will arrive, and history will come to a conclusion as we know it. There'll be a whole different reality. At least the sparks that concern us. There are sparks we don't even affect. God takes care of those ones. But the ones that are meant for men, they're in the lower chamber, and we're constantly making them go up. How do we do that? Well, a number of ways. Main way, learning Torah, mitzvahs, self-sacrifice for truth, and and even the suffering that we go through, especially the suffering we go through, moves the sparks in the lower chamber to the upper chamber. That's history. Everything else was going on in the elections and the House of Representatives and Congress and the Knesset and Parliament and what's happening in the streets, what's happening in the Beit Knesset, what's happening in the shul, what's happening with your family, what's happening with your neighbors. All of that is all secondary to the sparks going up. That's the whole show can be reduced to those two chambers, sparks, the lower one and the upper one. And that's all. That's life is just about that. And you can either be a spark elevator, or well, the truth is either way you'll be a spark elevator. The question is, it going to happen because you willingly didn't to cause it to happen, like tzaddikim do, or because something happened to you against your will, but that's history required it, and the spark was elevated through you, as opposed because of you. That's really the choice we have. There's nothing else. That's all of history. That's your entire life. Now, it may sound a little mundane and boring, but B'ezras Hashem, we've gone into more of the details about how that works. It's going to become much clearer about how we affect the Geula process, how we're able to literally just through our minds, to the point, and this is very important, and I know I've said this before in the past, but I'm going to emphasize it again, an individual can actually enter the reality of redemption even before the nation does. If it was a physical reality only or primarily, that wouldn't be possible. What difference does it make if I'm on a higher level? If I'm with the rest of the nation, I can't change the reality unless I go to a desert island somewhere, deserted island, right? But if it's a spiritual thing, a spiritual reality that then affects the physical reality, then I can already experience Geula even before other people do. And there are people actually who already are. They're already living with large elements, large parts of the Geula, reality of Geula because of their approach and understanding of life. We'll detail that more with Hashem in the future, and it'll become a little bit clearer, and you'll have more of a path to follow to try to take advantage of the system. Shabbos.
Thank you, Rabbi Winston. That was amazing. And also try to provide a few more details as to how to, not today, but to how we can balance that living with the Geula mindset and going to work every day and feeding our kids and babysitting our grandchildren who won't go to bed and things like that.
The reality is once you understand it better, it takes care of itself.
Oh, wow.
That's the reason we need to balance it right now is because we're not integrated. So it's like walking two sides of the road at the same time, two sides of a line at the same time. So that takes a lot of skill, right? But once a person actually is able to integrate the reality, it will take care of itself.
Amen. God willing. Thank you, Rabbi Winston. Have a wonderful Shabbat. Everybody have a good Shabbos, a wonderful Shabbat, and thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week.
Mitzvah Shem.
Thank you.